Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Phoenix Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Christo Scriven, and today I'm here with Mayaaz Reza, who is a top personal development voice on LinkedIn. And we've been talking over the last few weeks, and I'm really excited and happy to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Christo. I'm doing great and I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great, great. Yeah, thanks for coming on. The first thing I want to ask you about is your own journey and your own kind of transformation experience. In your own life, what has been the biggest obstacles or the biggest kind of growth points that you've had? Where is the biggest transformations happened in your own personal growth and development?
Yeah, so for me, I think the main thing is like before I went on this journey, I used to think that um you're either like born with confidence, you either have it or you don't. And secondly is that like you can't really control that like a lot of parts of your life. So the biggest transformation for me is that like most of the aspects of your life, most of the thoughts and things that you can control, if you can control your thoughts, if you can control your actions in a way, you can determine like where you go. So like confidence, like talent, even to a certain aspect are things that
Mhm.
you can develop. So for me, it's just that like it all depends on what kind of like time and effort you're willing to put in. And if you're willing to put in like adequate time and effort, things such as confidence, like speaking ability, skills, all of those things can be developed. So for me, the biggest takeaway is that it's like it's all in your control. It's just your thoughts and actions that drive the results and pave the way for you.
Sure, yeah. So when you were younger, you kind of had that fixed mindset rather than the growth mindset where you
Yeah.
thought everything was fixed, like you don't really get to develop the extra skills or on top of the talent. You kind of are born with those set ways of being in the world and there's no way of developing them and becoming better. Yeah, that's really interesting. And in your own experience, how has that impacted your life, developing that growth mindset?
So for me, it started like when I was younger, I just like struggled with my confidence a lot and I struggled with like, being really like comfortable in my own skin. And like my journey started out as just like being interested in fitness. So it started off as like trying to improve in that area of my life. And then when I started that and I did that, stuck to it for a while, I actually dedicated myself. I discovered that like when you put in effort and when you like really concentrate and like really learn the things that you need in order to improve in a certain area, that it's possible for you to like improve. So once I had that like proof, like okay, like if I just dedicate myself to improving something, like if I can do something as difficult as like change my body, which is like people say like, oh, you're given one body and like that's the one you have to like embrace. If I can do something as difficult as that, like maybe I can like focus on other aspects of my life and then try to like improve my skills there. So then that kind of led me down that path of like trying different things and like, okay, what can I learn about this area of my life and improve it there? So, it kind of like ties in like personal development. I feel like ties into like all aspects of your life. And depending on how you approach it, you can like change that aspect of your life.
Yeah, yeah. That's such I think actually a common way of coming almost into personal development. Before maybe for me, before I actually realized what personal development was as like an industry or a topic that I could actually apply myself to, fitness and bodybuilding was something that I naturally went into and had seen exactly what you're talking about. Like if you put in effort, you get results, and that's actually you get that positive dopamine of actually wanting to improve something by putting in effort rather than just thinking I'm not that way right now. I just stuck the way I am. And I think it's really important for guys to get into that when they're younger as much as possible, because you get that positive dopamine cycle going, and you think, wow, if I actually work, I can get the results. And it starts that snowballing of the winner effect. And you can see
Yeah.
those incremental improvements, and then you can see that in other areas of life as well. So what other areas of your life have you now seen that impact in your own experience?
Yeah, so you like almost immediately after I became like interested in personal development, like I was still a student at the time. So before I had discovered it, I was not a good student. So I struggled to concentrate. I had ADHD, all of those things. So like in school, I would struggle a lot. But like when I discovered that, oh, like it's just like it's not like a problem with me, it's a skill issue. I just basically have to improve like my processes. So like
Mm.
then I basically focused on, okay, like in order to like become good, become better at school, which is like one of my main like goals right now. What can I
Sure.
do? So like I took and applied like that like same level of like effort that it takes, same level of like dedication, as you could say, to like school, and then like going from just like middle school to high school to like university, I saw this like incremental like improvement, like there was like, okay, now like as I learned more on like how I can better myself at like retaining information, learning things,
Hmm.
immediately it was better. So like when that transitioned into like working, like I already knew that, okay, like if I need to like be better at my job, I need to focus on like the key things, what I need to get better at, focus on that, and then take it from there. So like it kind of creates like, as you said, like that like winning effect, because you kind of control your momentum, right? And so like momentum can be both like positive or negative. If you
Mm.
look at it in a negative way, like, oh, like, like I'm just not good at this, like maybe it's not for me. But if you look at it with, again, that growth mindset, like that positive outlook, like, okay, like I'm not good at it yet, but if I focus on these key things, I know I will be, and like given some amount of time.
Sure, yeah. I think that example of school and college, especially,
Yeah.
not so maybe not so much like extracurricular or higher education like university, because that's a choice, but everyone has to go to school,
Yeah.
right? So, and a lot of the time we have, or we can be told this notion that if you're not getting good grades, it's just, you did your best and you can't do any better than your best. And if you get told that, it's just like, oh, well, that means I'm not capable of getting good grades.
Yeah.
Maybe I didn't do my best, but I was told that I did do my best. I was told that my level of application is is equal to the actual me kind of giving my best. So that you giving your best to that degree is all you can do. But really, there's so much more you can apply yourself to. And people say this about education in this way, that a lot of time it's, oh, I'm just not really interested in that. And if you find a subject or something like that you're interested in, you're going to be able to naturally apply yourself better and then get better grades. But this experience of personal growth, that you can develop the skills and the attitude and the focus in such a way where you can apply yourself to something, even if you're not necessarily like naturally interested in it, because you see how important it is for your own life anyway. And then it creates this whole nother level of growth that we don't really naturally get told. Like my parents, when I was brought up, there was very much that fixed mindset. It was like, oh, you got that grade. Okay, well, as long as you did your best. It was not like, how can we improve this? Do you think you can improve this ability or this this trait or something like that, or this skill of how you can change your beliefs and things like that? But I guess my parents didn't have access to that information now. And then we've grown up having access to that information, realizing that, well, if I learn this stuff, if I apply myself, things can actually turn out different. It's not just going to be the same thing manifesting over and over again.
Yeah, I think you brought up like a very important thing there. It's like before the whole focus was on like, oh, if you did your best, if you tried your best, you kind of like you're pretty good. But like the focus there is on like effort, right? And it's not so much on like the other aspect, because like there's also like skill. Like, yes, you can't put in more effort, but if you divided that effort into like something like developing skills in different areas,
Mm.
maybe your like effort would be more fruitful, right? It's not only your effort, but it's also like the thing is, it's like, the famous saying, like work smarter, not harder. So it's also that like you also want to focus on like, okay, like maybe I tried hard, but maybe I could have like tried to like this different thing in a different way, and maybe that would have worked. So that's like one important thing, right? It's like not always like you don't always want to just keep working harder because there's a limit, but like if you like try to find different ways of doing something, maybe you'll find a way that where don't have to put in as much effort, but you
Sure.
get like better results.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think such a great part of personal development is that it encourages you to look inwards and get to know yourself and develop your self awareness more. And without doing that, if you just think like, oh, I tried my best, but I'm just not good at that thing, I don't learn, like, say the teacher's teaching you in a certain way, and you just think, oh, I'm just not good at learning. But really, you just need to learn it in a different way. And
Yeah.
personal development helps you to realize that, oh, okay, maybe there's different ways that I can do this. Maybe my brain kind of functions differently to other people. And like being introspective, bringing that self awareness helps you to realize, okay, that's how I can kind of hack my own brain and learn stuff easier in these different ways. And it gives you that encouragement, I think, to think that that's actually possible rather than just thinking you are the way you are. But it's like, no, you have the choice to change your direction and change how you respond to stimuli in the world. If things aren't going your way, you can behave and act differently, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like I think that's like one of the most overlooked aspects. Like people like will just label themselves like, oh, I'm this, or like I'm not good at this, I'm good at this. Like there's just like these labels. But like, like when you're on this journey, you know that like there are no labels. It's like you are what you do. It's not like you aren't just like a fixed thing, right? Like you're not just a label, like you're constantly evolving and you have that ability to evolve. So like just like labeling yourself as like I'm an introvert, so I will never do public speaking or something like that, right? But like
Mm.
public speaking is a skill. Like you can like learn it. It's it's not easy, but it's like even for introverts, like like Steve Jobs was like a self-proclaimed introvert, but he was
Mm.
like one of the best presenters, salespeople like of all time. And it wasn't that he like used a lot of like words or something. It was just like he found his own method to it, his own
Sure.
like charisma. And
Mm.
that's what kind of made him like one of the most famous like presenters, marketers of all time. So it's just like finding your own like comfort zone in that area and then trying to push it to like develop skills that help you like maximize your like abilities.
Sure, yeah. And what do you think it is that stops people from being open to these kinds of ideas? Like there's I think a lot of people have access to this information now, but they just kind of choose not to accept it or choose that they don't actually want to improve themselves. They just kind of want to stay the way they are. Like if they're saying, oh, I'd kind of like to be a public speaker or be good at that, but I'm just not. But then someone says to them, well, you can develop that skill, and they're just like, oh, nah, I don't really. What do you think it is that causes that kind of reaction?
Yeah, I think you like mentioned it already. It's the first stage of that, like first step of that process, like self-awareness, because like self-awareness is what leads you down that journey, right? Like you only have like a reason to like change when you are comfortable enough to say that like I need to change and I have a need to change, and you're self-aware enough to say that like yes, like here's where my strengths are, here's where my weaknesses are, but also like it's not a fixed thing. I can change it. So like firstly it's like self-awareness, and then having that like growth mindset to like, okay, like now I know what like how I am, and now I know like that it can be changed, and then you would go on to like, okay, what can I do to change it? That would be like the next phase of that.
Sure, yeah. I think a lot of people have those kind of personality traits, or they don't like the way they look or the way their voice sounds. Like that's such a natural thing. When people hear their voice back, like recorded back to them and played back to them, they just hate the way their own voice sounds. And self-awareness, I think self-awareness is the starting point, but then it leads you eventually, if you're open to it, into self-acceptance. And once you can accept yourself and accept those things that you don't necessarily like about yourself, then you can just move past those things and just think, oh, do you know what? These things aren't great. I don't love them I don't like them about myself, but I can accept them, which means then I can move into self-love and then express myself no matter what those small insecurities are, right?
Yeah. And I think like when you like really embrace that journey, like when you really like dedicate yourself, over time, like things that you cannot control kind of start like mattering a lot less. Because that's what really helps with that self-acceptance. Because when you really do focus on like, okay, what are the things I can change, you don't really spend too much time worrying about what are the things I can't change. So it's like also about like the perspective of how you look at it. Because if you're always looking at the negatives, like, oh, I can't change this, I can't change that, it's gonna look a lot more grim than if you're like, I have so much growth potential in all these areas, and like if I just focus my energy and time on that, like I could be so much better. So the
Sure.
perspective is important.
Yeah, perspective is massively important. And yeah, you touched on a really good point there, like figuring out what you can and can't change. And we spend so much time worrying and thinking about things that we literally just can't control. We can't change them. And there's generally a very small amount of things in our lives that we can actually change. There's a famous quote. I forget who it's from, but it says that the only thing in this, the only thing you can truly change in life is the small corner of the universe that is yourself. Like there's nothing else that you can generally change. You can only focus on changing yourself. Like if you're trying to change other people, other places, other things, it's going to leave you feeling defeated, because what can you do? What can you really do? You don't have any control over anyone else. Yeah, it's really powerful when you can just focus on those things that, like you say, that you can change, and even things about yourself that you can't necessarily change right away. And that's where that self-acceptance comes in. Go, I can accept myself as I am right now. But self-acceptance doesn't just mean that you accept yourself and aren't willing to change and don't accept your capacity to change. Don't just become completely complacent with who you are and say, oh, do you know what? I'm overweight, or I haven't got good skills in this area, or I'm not smart enough to pass this test. It's about accepting that, oh, I am overweight right now. And do you know what? It's okay because that's where I am, but I'm going to change it. And there's another quote from Maxwell Maltz, the author of Psycho-Cybernetics, and he talks about how if you can't accept yourself right now, you'll never see opportunities because you don't believe that you'll be worthy of it. You won't feel like you're deserving of things because you can't accept yourself right now, and you won't be able to even move forward and change.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like that's such an important thing because like only when you accept all of yourself and accept that there are things that you just can't change, that's when you like really can focus on the things that you can change, right? So like the it's not like a process like, oh, I'm just gonna like from today I'm gonna start accepting like all of these things. Like it takes time. It's like a almost a lifelong thing where like you want to like slowly like, okay, like I don't like this, but like this small thing like I'm okay with, and like as you go along, it just like with time everything gets like easier. And so and you kind of change over time with like just embracing that mindset.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, there's a great story I heard from Grant Cardone once, actually, and he said that he was with his father in their like backyard in their house, and they were picking up sticks in the garden, and his dad was like really like into what he was doing, really engrossed in it, like picking up loads of sticks, like being really fast and really thorough with it, and putting them all in this bag. And Grant said to his dad, he's like, "Dad, do you like doing this?" And he turned around and he said, "Son, you don't have to like what you do to love what you do." And since I heard that like years ago, I've thought about that a lot and realized that that applies to pretty much everything. It doesn't have to apply just to things you do. It also applies to places, other people, and your own self. Like, you don't have to like everything about yourself to love everything about yourself. And if you're in a long-term relationship, say, or you have parents, like everyone has parents, right? You don't have to like everything about your partner to love everything about them. But you have to go through that stage of acceptance first. And this is really difficult with parents, especially, right? Like, I'm going to completely accept my parents and I can love every single thing about them. But there's so many things that we might not like about our parents that we find difficult to accept, and we want to change them. But it comes into a Eastern philosophy idea that of non-attachment, right? Not being attached to things and not having expectation. Is when you can accept things, then you're not attached to it. It's okay. Oh, it's okay. Do you know what? You're a bit annoying. That thing you do, I didn't like, but it's fine. I'm not attached to it. I'm not attaching my sense of okayness or my happiness to what you're doing. And that frees me up to then just express myself in the best way possible. Yeah.
Yeah, and like that's also a difficult thing, right? Because like as human beings, where like emotions are natural, so it's natural for us to attach emotions to like anything. So like
True. Yeah.
whenever something happens, it's like the first thing is like, how do I feel about it? It's never like, what do you think? What's your perspective? Like, like the most common thing is like, how do I feel about it? So really, like you want to go from like how do I feel about it to like, okay, like objectively, what does this really like mean for me? Like a lot of things like don't affect you directly at all, and then still you have like a feeling or an opinion about it. But like when you realize like this doesn't actually like concern me that much, like, or affect me that much, so you kind of have like, it's like the most freeing feeling, like, oh, like I'm like, I don't have to worry about this. Like I'm just unnecessarily concerning myself.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think the more you do that, the more you realize that you are overly attaching to things, and you don't need to, that you can be happy and not have to worry about so many things that are completely outside your control. I want to come back to that, the idea of it's all about perspective. So we're talking about that just now, and tying that into the winner effect, because I know the winner effect, it kind of says that the more you win, the more you have confidence and you believe in your abilities, and your serotonin and your dopamine levels go up. Yeah. So you're more likely to win, right? And the opposite is also true. Like the more you lose, you're lower in dopamine, you're lower in serotonin, you kind of fall down the socioeconomic hierarchy somewhat, and then you're more likely to lose, and then it's this kind of negative cycle going down. But from what I've learned about it is that it's very much about perspective as well. So what one person might perceive as a win, another person might perceive as a loss, and it depends on how you see it, of how the effect actually has an effect on you. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think like you touched on a good point there, because like it depends on how you see success, right? So one of the main things of like the winning effect is like, like we talked about it earlier, like the good dopamine cycle. So like that good dopamine cycle is kind of very important, because good dopamine is like when you work hard for something, and then when you work hard for it, you're rewarded. So that good dopamine, it kind of reinforces that, okay, for me to like get something good, I have to like put in some form of effort. And like when you have that, it kind of like reinforces like a positive cycle. So like the effort itself is seen as like the as the reward instead of the result. So when
Mm,
that happens, like even though sometimes like like something things aren't going to work out like perfectly as you like want them to, but like when you know that like okay, my like what I tried and what I did was like sufficient, it doesn't
mm,
hurt you as much. So it doesn't take away from your confidence as much. So like all confidence really is like when we're like having self-belief and like saying that you will do what you tell yourself you will do, right? So like the thing that really hurts your confidence is like you'll tell yourself like, okay, from tomorrow I'm gonna go to the gym. And then tomorrow rolls around and you don't do it. And then you keep
mm.
repeating it over time, even though like you don't realize it, you're kind of like hurting your confidence a lot because then like when you say you'll do something, you're like, I said it, but I don't know anymore. So like you've lost your confidence. It's because you've built up that negative momentum because it's just like you kind of have you can like do it in a positive way or you can do it in a negative way, but it's like that perspective and seeing like okay, like if I said something, then I will do it. And then like just at that adding up, it doesn't seem like much, but it adds up to like building that like real confidence like people have.
Not being able to stick to your own word is like a sense of it's like a self betrayal. Like if you said to someone else you were going to do something and you just said it over and over and over, and every time they believed you, after time they would just stop believing you. They would stop trusting you. So the more you say you're going to do something and then you don't do it, erodes your sense of self trust, right? And how can like and in a relationship, if you want to have confidence in your relationship, you need to be able to trust the other person. You need to have trust in the relationship. So like to be able to have confidence in yourself, you need to be able to trust yourself. And just doing those little things, that's why I think it's really important to start small and say, I'm going to do this, and then you stick to it. And you also talked about how like kind of making the process part of the goal. And when you realize that, oh, I worked the process, I might not have got the result that I wanted, but I know that I'm a winner because I did the process, right? And then the winner effect has its effect because you see yourself as someone who is a winner because you know that you stuck to your word. But making those things small enough that allows you to actually stick to it rather than making it such a big thing like, oh, I'm going to eat healthy and go to the gym every day for the whole next year. Like start small, say like next 5 days and then like 30 days and then do like a 90-day challenge. But it's hard sometimes when you're starting things out because your baseline level of your habits are really hard to break out of. I've found that I have to do challenges to create like a new normal for myself. Like I have to say, I'm going to do this thing for 30 days. And then once I do it for 30 days, then it becomes, I can be more flexible with it. But before that point, there's no flexibility. It's just, I'm not doing it whatsoever. I had like having this all or nothing mindset, I think. Like, do you know what? If I'm not going to go to the gym every day this week, or if I'm not going to go because I can't go on Wednesday and I can't go on Friday because I've got this other thing. So there's no point in going on Monday either. It's like, no, if you're going to go one day, you may as well go. You don't have to be all or nothing. You can have this flexibility and this more of a light touch with things.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think I think the thing is like you want to keep it as like simple as possible before you add complexity, right? So I think like one of the best like advice I've like heard regarding this is like um before like you like add up to your to-do list, just make like a to start list. So it's like, okay, instead of saying like, oh, I'm gonna go to the gym, and then after I go to the gym, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna like run on the treadmill. Then after that, I'm gonna eat healthy for the rest of the day. Just like make a to start list. Like put on your shoes, get in the car, go to the gym. Like
Mm.
like the simpler action instead of focusing on the whole process itself. Just like the easiest thing, like put on your shoe, get in the car, like drive to the gym. Like if you're doing that, if you're showing up like and like making it like easy enough, like removing as much friction as possible to like get the task started, it'll be much easier for you to be like consistent. And once you're consistent, like it, you can build that habit, like it becomes like more repeatable.
Sure, yeah, yeah. So starting with the really small stuff. And when you talk about a lot about systems and building habits and skills through systems. So what you
Yeah.
touched on something then that is like this beginning level system for building a habit. And what are some other systems that people can use, or what do you use yourself
Yeah.
in terms of habits?
Oh, some of the best ones is just like start working on something for like 2 minutes before you say that like I don't want to do this or something. Like usually like the hardest part of a task is just getting started because like you have that like that desire to procrastinate. So you want to like just get right into it, start it,
Mm,
and then like usually when you start and you do it for like just 2 to 5 minutes, it could be 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever. You most of the time you just continue doing it because like then you're like, oh well, I started and it's like not going so bad. I might as well continue. So like that's one of the best ones for just like getting started, right? And like
mhm,
another thing is like you want to like do like start your day with like some positive like wins, right? So one easy thing is like, okay, if you like start your
mm,
day and you have a lot of work, start with like some easy tasks like that take less than 2 minutes. Okay, so like a bunch of tasks take less than 2 minutes. You'll
mhm,
add up, you'll do like five like tasks in 10 minutes and you've already built like a good positive momentum for the day. So you're like, oh, like there we go. Like I got a ton of things done, even though you've like barely put in much time. You've kind of had that positive momentum going already, and then like you kind of like don't need to like motivate yourself to do the harder thing. So if you have like something hard to do, like do something very easy first. Do it, start that, get that positive win out, and then just start the thing, you know? Don't give yourself time to like procrastinate. So like those two are like personally my favorite. Like I do like the 2 minute thing like almost every day. Like
mhm.
now, like I don't have to motivate myself too much to like, oh, like, just start for 2 minutes or start for 5 minutes. But I always start my day with like just very simple tasks, like open my email, check all my emails, like simple things that I need to get done. And that kind of get like really just like starts you off. Like there's no difficulty, there's no preparation, and you start off with a positive momentum.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good way of doing it, I think, especially if you're someone who procrastinates a lot. It's interesting that you're
Yeah.
saying that because it's kind of the opposite of the eat the frog idea, where you want to do the hardest thing straight away. But I think for a lot of people, they just can't do it. Even if it comes back to that thing is like, yeah, tomorrow I'm gonna do the really hard, I'm gonna just sit down and record the YouTube video. Yeah, and then tomorrow comes around and they just can't get themselves to do it because there's so many. It's such a big thing. It's just a huge frog that is gonna they're just gonna choke on if they try and eat it, right? So they
Yeah.
can't do that thing, and breaking it down into those smaller parts or doing those easier things, I think is a really good idea for a lot of people. Um,
Yeah, because like, like, sorry,
no, I was gonna say like
the
I wonder
connection
if
is like,
it could right it could
let me,
yeah, I think that's better now.
we good?
I think we're good. Are we good?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's like it lagged for a bit and then I was like stuck. So now it's fine, I think.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Should be fine. Yeah, like we've got the local recordings happening, so I just edit up afterwards. Do you can you remember what you were going to say?
I was gonna say like either like the eat the frog technique is good because you do want to do like the hardest thing, like your most important task earlier in the day when you have the most energy. But it's just like you don't have to start with it. Like maybe for like 10, 10, 15 minutes in the day, you can start with like much easier ones. And then you hardly like spent much energy doing like really easy tasks, right? And like it's difficult. Like you're not gonna wake up every day with the same energy. You're not gonna be at like 100% every day. So like you can't really
Mhm.
wake up and immediately like, okay, I'm gonna do this hard thing. Some days you just need to go in, like do the basics without thinking, without like needing brain power, and then it's easier to get into harder things, you know? It's like a
Sure.
scalable thing.
Hmm. For me, I find sometimes that if I've got a lot of smaller tasks that are hanging over me, not necessarily daily things, kind of like more administrative stuff that happens monthly or weekly, and those things need to be done. And I've kind of been putting them off because I've been eating the frog. I'm like, I'm doing the big thing too much, focusing on the big thing, and I'm putting off the little like maintenance things. I get to a point where I'm like, I just have to do those things because they're all in the back of my mind. I have to clear out the space in the back of my mind so I can then properly focus again. So I think it comes back to self awareness again, right? Of knowing yourself, knowing what's the best way to move forward for you, but also to be adaptable, to be flexible. You don't have to be so rigid all the time. I think being like for me, being like I said, doing challenges, so being very rigid for periods of time to kind of get that momentum going and like really get that period of intensity and that boost going. That's really important. But if you're someone who's very a self starter and you can just kind of self motivate and you're not this kind of all or nothing person, I think it's like a slightly addictive tendency to be like an all or nothing person. Like either I'm going all in on YouTube or on LinkedIn, whatever I'm doing, or I'm just not going to do it at all because there's no point. But having more of an adaptable, flexible outlook, I think, is really important. But at the same time, there is that balance. I was watching a podcast, Leon Hendricks' podcast. He interviewed Sam Ovens, the guy who created
Yeah.
School now,
Yeah.
and he did the consulting. And now Sam Ovens is this very kind of laid back, kind of modern hippie kind of dude now. He just seems so chilled out.
Yeah.
He's just
With
like,
like with long hair and everything.
yeah, like he's really chilled and he's just talking about, oh, does not everything has to be so strict, not everything has to be so rigid. You can be flexible and go with the flow. I don't plan my days and weeks out like perfectly, trying to be this like productivity god. But if you watch his videos from like 5 years ago, 7 years ago, maybe, then it's very different. He's talking about like focusing all your attention, all your energy on this one thing for prolonged periods of time and being really strict and really disciplined about it. And I think if you're someone who's a bit flaky, if you're not just naturally talented and you can just go in on things and just nail them, you have to have that rigidity. You have to have that intense focus to discipline yourself. So then later you can be more flexible, but still do the shit you need to do when you need to do it.
Yeah. And I think like it just goes back to that like there's no one size fits all when it comes to like how you want to be like productive or like focus on like doing something because like everyone has their own process. And even for like individual, like from individual to individual, because like we're constantly changing, constantly evolving, even like your process itself, what works for you, what you like right now, might not be what you like 5 years from now. It might be completely different. You might prioritize different things. And that's like normal, you know, it's just
Mm.
it's part of the process to like go along with it and like see what works for you. Like it's like an ever evolving thing.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, everything comes in cycles, right? Like everything happens
Yeah.
in waves. And we have periods in our life, I think, when there is that intensity, and then we have periods that we can be more flexible and just be more laid back and chilled. And it's about being adaptable enough to and accepting that those things happen so you can then just ride the wave and be happy in any circumstance. Like maybe you're someone who just loves driving forward and you're in this kind of chilled out and you haven't got the time or the energy right now to really just sink your teeth into a project and you're just kind of fighting, I wish I could do something, but just rather than wanting things to change and be on the other side of the fence, or the grass is greener on the other side, then you can just accept where you are right now and be happy there and realize that everything comes to an end at some point, and you're going to have that opportunity again to do that thing. And it just allows you to have so much more of a easier time in life. But on the opposite side of it, right, of like being, if you're a very laid back person and then you're having a period of intensity, you're fighting, you're just, I just want this stress to be over. I don't want to like be pouring myself into something so much. Just realizing that it's only temporary and it will come to an end. So kind of enjoying the process, no matter what environment you're in.
Yeah, exactly. Like, because again, like it's that thing about like balance and balance. Like, I think the misconception about it is that like when you're balanced, like every day is kind of just like perfectly balanced, like good or bad, like productive, rest. Balance really is like one week, maybe you'll have to do like a lot more work than you usually do, but like because of that, the next week is not as bad. So in a way, you're still balanced, right? So you could have like a 3-4 week sprint, and then once you're done with that, you can like go back to relaxing. It's still balanced, but like the thing is like you have to like have that like self-awareness and that recognition to, okay, like what is like most important right now, and what do I have to focus on right now to make it like go perfectly, and then I can like try to like balance it out better.
Sure, sure. I think it's really important as well to have that self-regulation, like you talked about, and a lot of that is self-talk, right? If you're like in one experience and you've got these thoughts in your head, I wish this was over, I wish I could just be at this other place, I wish I could do these other things, and you have these thoughts going in your head, like what is really important is being able to moderate your own internal dialogue.
Yeah.
Right. And you talk about that a lot. You talk about your own positive self-talk. So should we go into that?
Yeah, I feel like that is like such an important thing, even like for all of the things we've discussed, right? Like the one of the core things for me, at least, for like in my personal development journey, is like positive self-talk is like very important for you to like not only like have that drive and but like also like use the winner effect, build your confidence, right? Because like if everything like is always negative, especially in your head and like how you talk to yourself, you're never going to like be like building your confidence. You're never going to look at things like objectively and be motivated to like put in effort, because if you're thinking of it like negatively, you put in all this effort and it doesn't work out, and you're negatively saying like, oh, I messed up, it kind of like hurts you. But like if you're like, oh well, like I tried my best, it just didn't work out, that's a completely different thing. Like,
Yeah.
there's like the kind of effect that has on you is like completely different. So I feel like that's a like very important thing, like especially in personal development, like developing that like positive self-talk and like really like stopping the negative self-talk just as much.
So having that self-encouragement and kind of guiding yourself through the growth mindset idea and making, I think a really helpful thing to do is to make the growth the goal. Like in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the very top need is self-actualization. So if you make self-actualization the goal, to achieve that, you still have to attain all of the other needs, because you can't self-actualize if you're not providing yourself with all the lower needs in your life. So, but if you just make survival, or like just having a roof over your head and clothes on your back and food to eat your number one goal, and you're struggling to do that, but how are you going to feel good about yourself? How are you going to have that positive self-talk? Because you're attaching the good feeling to the result. But self-actualization, there's no real result, because you don't know what your highest potential is. Maybe there's no limit to your potential. So when you aim at self-actualization, when you make growth the goal, when you're trying to fulfill that need of having a roof over your head and clothes on your back and food, you might be failing. Like you might not be producing very many results, but you could be learning and you could be growing in the process and seeing those challenges as learning opportunities. But without having that higher end goal and thinking, oh, the reason I need to do this is because I need to grow, not just because I need to survive. I think that's really important, especially in that self-talk way, and to deepen your ideas in that way, instead of just thinking like, oh, I'm just trying to put a band-aid on the plaster that you feel bad about, and saying like, oh, I'm not doing so good, but it's okay because I tried my best. And next time it's like, oh no, actually making it about the growth and making it about fulfilling your own potential in life.
Yeah. And I like you touched on a very important thing, right? Because like when you're just like focusing on like the bottom tier things, like obviously you need to make money, you need a roof over your head, you need all
Mm-hmm.
those things. But like we also see like a lot of successful people that are very miserable. And it's not like they don't have all those other things and they don't have like anything that they could possibly want. Like for me, how I look at it is that like they didn't like ever prioritize that self-actualization, and they prioritize all these other things. And yes, it got them to that point because they had that drive, they had like, they put in that effort.
Mm-hmm.
But once they got there, they realized that those things are not what actually like makes you happy, right? Like happiness is something that you create like by like it's not from like external things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why like it's a very important thing to like realize early on, is that like, okay, like I need all these things, but it doesn't mean that like, okay, once I have everything I need, then I can focus on like my growth and self-actualization. It's not actually like that. Like you can start from the beginning and like be focused on like your goal being like, okay, I need all these things, but I also want to be happy. So just having that mindset, I feel like would change a lot for a lot of people.
Sure, yeah. It's like having your vision and your eyes set on the growth, on self-actualization, about becoming the best, most fulfilled person, like filling your own potential. But on the way, you're like, you cannot do that without satisfying those other needs first, because that's how you grow, by tackling those challenges and saying, okay, if I'm struggling financially, how can I fix this? That's a growth opportunity. Without actually tackling those real world problems, you're not going to self-actualize. So like without all the lower tiers, self-actualization just kind of falls away anyway. You need those other tiers to hold up self-actualization so you can move your way up through them. But I think it's important to keep your eyes and set your intention, your direction up to the top. So when we talk about positive self-talk as well, like there's that encouragement aspect of it. If like things aren't going well and things are challenging, you can encourage yourself through things and say, like, I'm doing my best, and kind of try and kind of mentally trick yourself into the winner effect. But then there's the other side of it, which is like more of the secret, the manifestation, the law of attraction, or like NLP side of things, where you're like, instead of just kind of nurturing yourself or self-parenting or encouraging yourself, you're deliberately saying those things. Like Tony Robbins talks about this, right? He talks about like incantations, where like he says like an affirmation is like, oh, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, but you're not. Like an incantation is where you like you use your whole body to embody the thing that you want to create. So what are your thoughts there on that side of it, on those kind of positive self-talk?
On like visualization and that.
Yeah, and affirmations, like saying things that you want to be or do or have, not just
Yeah.
as a like a reaction to negative thoughts, but just trying to influence or condition your own mind in that way.
Yeah, I think like one of the best things like I've read is like your brain can't actually tell the difference between like a real experience and something you imagine. So like when you have like that daily habit of like positive affirmations, positive self-talk, visualization, whatever your process may be, when you constantly put yourself into that frame of mind, you over time, because your brain can't actually tell the difference between like if it's real or not, like you are aware of it, your consciousness is aware of it, but your brain is actually like functioning in a way, in a very like positive way of you like going towards those things. So when you like constantly back up yourself like with positive self-talk that this is where I'm headed, this is what I'm gonna do, and this is what I'm doing, it kind of like keeps clicking and it kind of pushes you with that positive momentum, it pushes you forward, right? So I think that like things like that are like super important, like especially for like when you like have like a strong like desire, a strong like why as to you're doing something, you don't need like that like sheer willpower to like force yourself to do something. It just becomes more natural. So I feel like something like positive self-talk, even though it's very overlooked, I think something like that could like literally like change how you approach things, like the effort you put in, how you look at things, if you just like do it for long enough, like with like enough consistency.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely. For me, earlier on in my personal development journey, I think I got really good at using that side of the positive self-talk, like saying the affirmations and visualization and things like that. But when I then went out and did something and it didn't go exactly to plan, I had those negative thoughts come up and I didn't have that kind of self-parenting or encouraging aspect, like to talk myself through those negative effects. And I think a big part of that was because I was focused on the outcome. Like I was attached to the outcome rather than saying this is a growth opportunity, and every kind of time I fail, it just allows me to self-actualize more and become a better person. I really was just attached to the outcome. I'm only doing this thing because of the outcome, and it ties back into what we were saying about that, right? And if you're only looking for the outcome, it's very difficult to have that positive self-talk and encourage yourself through those things. But I think at the same time, saying those affirmations and the visualization and things like that have definitely had a massive effect on my own identity, like how I perceive myself, how I perceive the world, my beliefs about what I can achieve and do. I think they both have their place. But if I was going to pick one now, I think I'd pick the encouraging side of it, because it's more about having a relationship with yourself, right? And knowing when you're feeling certain ways and being able to guide your own consciousness through those experiences that you're having.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I completely relate with that. Like for me as well. Like, it was easy for me to like build up my like positive self-talk enough to like go and do things and like motivate myself to go and do hard things, pursue them.
Mm.
But like when they didn't work out or like when something didn't go my way, like I really didn't like recognize this aspect of it as to like it's not my fault and like I shouldn't like blame it on myself, right? So the best like kind of thing I read about this is like whenever this happens, like just talk to yourself as if like you were your own best friend. Like give yourself this like the
Mm.
advice, support that you would give like a friend in your situation. So obviously if your best friend is in like a situation where they're not happy, you're not gonna go and tell them like, oh, you messed up, like what you did was like not good. It's your fault. You're gonna be like, look, man, like it didn't work out. Like, yes, it was hard, but like you tried, you did this. Like, it's a completely different thing. Like when you just take a step back, like look at the perspective, and you try to look at it from that like the lens of like, okay, what would I tell my friend? You
Mm.
like positive self-talk like changes up a lot from just that like small shift. So like when I started doing that, like found that I stopped like labeling myself less. Like if I did something didn't work out, I'm like, oh man, I'm a screw up or something like that. Instead of that, like a friend would not say that to you. So I would be like, well, like you put in effort. Okay, this one didn't work out. Like you're not a screw up. It's just maybe like try something different next time or something, but like it's a completely different way of looking at it altogether.
Sure, yeah, yeah. That's really powerful, man. And I think one of the reasons why it's so powerful, because it gives you that sense of objectivity. So you're not just completely engrossed in your own mind, in your own thoughts and your own emotions. If you think like, if I was a friend, then what would I say to them in the same situation? And then it kind of takes you out of your own experience and you can look at it more objectively. One of the hardest things to do is to take your own advice. like like if you're going through a really bad hardship too, because you're so engrossed in it and you're like swept up in the current of emotions, to see the way out is so difficult. And then when sometimes you can kind of mentally grapple yourself into this thing and go, okay, if I had a friend that was in this situation, what would I say to them? And then you realize that you know exactly what to do. You have the perfect advice that you would give to someone else, but because you're in that situation yourself, it's so difficult to see the way out, and it's so difficult to have that objectivity. So that's such an important and great realization. Yeah.
Yeah, like I have an analogy for this. Like, let me know if this relates. Like, when you lose something and it's like just in your room, you just don't know where it is.
Mm.
And you're looking for it like everywhere. Like, oh my God, I'm looking for it here, there, whatever. And you're just like constantly looking for it and you can't find it anywhere. And then as soon as like, okay, whatever, I'll look for it later, you come back and then like it's like right there in front of your face. Like, oh, like, oh my God, how did I not like see this all this time?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of like that, isn't it? Like when you like just take a step back, it's like completely different.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And that's an interest. It comes in that idea as well. I think we can really expand that out, and we could talk about that a lot. This idea that when you kind of let go of something, you can take a step back, and then the solution just kind of appears. When you're really forcing something to happen, then it doesn't happen until like the very minute that you stop looking for it, kind of thing. The last episode I did with a guy called Nuno Reis, he was telling me about the story of Einstein, how he made his discovery of the law of special relativity. So like he became famous, and then he wrote like 3 groundbreaking papers all in the space of 1 year, and then 10 years went by where he was working on his theory of special relativity, and he just couldn't figure it out. And then one day he was with his one friend. He had one friend, and he said, "Do you know what? I'm just going to quit." And then basically, as soon as he decided that he was going to give up, that was when he made the discovery. So it's so interesting, and it's something I apply now myself to that exact situation. If I lose something and I'm looking for it and I don't know where it is, I go, "Do you know what? I'm just going to leave it up to the universe, and I'm going to find it in a bit, and I'll just try, like, just walk away and forget about it. I don't need it right now." And then I always find it, even if I'm out on walks. If I'm out walking with my daughter, she might like take a toy with her, and then she'll drop it, and I'm like, I have no idea where that is, but I know I'm going to find it. I will find it. That's my intention. And then like a day later, I'm out on a walk, and it's just there at the side of the road or something like that. Like somewhere, I just always find these things when I have that intention.
It's like always in plain sight, like right there, like
Yeah.
it's never hidden somewhere. It's always in plain sight. But like I feel like this like such an appropriate analogy for like how like you feel like when you like detach yourself from something, when you're like so attached to it with like your all your emotions, you're like it's just hard for you to like be objective about it or to like have that clarity. And as soon as you can like really detach yourself from it, it becomes like so clear, like it was right there. How could I not see it all this time?
Sure. It's such a strange paradox. Like when you're looking for something, you can't find it. And then the moment you stop looking, it's there. It's such a weird thing. And I think, but it literally applies to things you're looking for, but also like things you're seeking, like bigger things you're seeking in life when you're just trying to force something. And then one moment you just think, to hell with it. And you're just going to give up. And then that moment that you let go and you give up, that's when like it just opens up the kind of gates of the universe, and it just allows things to flow to you. So interesting.
Yeah. It's a thing like you can't force anything. It has to like somehow come in the flow of things. And like when you master at like that approach of like not pushing it too hard, but still being focused on it, it like things will just start coming a lot easier to you.
Yeah, sure. It's very difficult to get that right. Very difficult, because if you're working on something and you don't want to be lazy, right? You don't want to feel like you're not giving it your all, but at the same time you're thinking, well, if I just took a break, would things happen? Would it allow things to happen in a much more easy way, in a more flowing way? Yeah, so interesting. I think it's sometimes it can be great to have people around you, right, that can say, do you know what, I think it's, yeah, just leave it for a bit. Like having really good friends is really important, and being that friend for yourself, and having that awareness to have that internal dialogue, not just be completely swept away in your thoughts all the time, but actually be able to kind of figure things out and actually have a conversation with yourself in your own head. But on top of that, yeah, like having an actual support system in the world is really, really helpful, because sometimes your mind is just a storm and you just can't like figure it out. You can't figure out a way out, right? So you write about this, like the importance of having support systems, and like what kind of support systems do you have in your life, and what advice would you give to someone that feels like they need more of this?
Well, like the thing is like if you have like like people around you and you're like constantly like around these people, you immediately like from like maybe one interaction kind of know, like obviously you can't choose your family, right? You can't like choose a lot of things, but you can like choose like who you're constantly spending time with, be that your like circle, your the five closest people to you, and you want like the majority of those people to be people that like affect you like in a positive way. So the self-fulfilling prophecy kind of also applies to your circle, right? The it's like said that when you're surrounded by people that have higher expectations of you and believe in you like more, you actually tend to be more successful than when you're surrounded constantly by people that don't believe in you. And like this, it's like both, it goes both ways, right? Like it can be internal, like if you believe in yourself and you're surrounded by people that believe in you, it kind of does affect your entire self-image, and like that kind of determines all your actions. So it could like have a big impact on your life, right? So like you want to do an audit of like if I talk about like what I really care about, what like really matters to me with this person, do they react to it in a way that like makes me feel positive about it, or do they react to it in a way that makes me feel negative about not only the thing I'm talking about or about myself? So what you really want to do is just like talk to the 2-3 people that like make you feel positive, and that kind of like is enough for you, because you don't like really need like a lot of people to believe in you in order for you to like believe in yourself. It's just like a few people you can really talk to, and then have that own like your own positive self-talk, and that it by itself is like enough support for you to like feel like, wow, like I'm pretty good like where I am right now.
Sure, yeah, yeah. It's really, really powerful. People say that just having a few really close friends is better than having lots of like just lots of friends that aren't that close. I think that's really important to do that kind of review as well, and saying like, is there people actually around me that genuinely want the best for me, and support me in the things that I want to do? And it can be really, really hard if you find out that you don't have many people around you that feel like that. Maybe it's not, maybe not in family, Maybe the friends that you have right now don't even believe you in that way, believe in you. And for me, in my journey, that's where personal development came in so much, because I was listening to people that were saying things that made me kind of feel like I could believe in myself, but also like they could believe, the people I was listening to, they believed in me. Otherwise, they wouldn't be saying these things. You know, they were saying that like that you have the potential to become more and overcome more challenges and have a better life, become a better human being. And through doing that, like it made me feel like, yeah, that was possible. But then around me, no one's backing that up. I didn't feel like I had that in my actual real world influences in my social circle. So then people go through this lonely chapter, right? I think it's like Chris Williamson and Alex Hormozy have coined the phrase now, the lonely chapter, and that's it's a perfect analogy for that idea of when you're going through this period and you want to do better and become better and break out of the norms that you grew up in, and you want to have a better life for yourself and surround yourself with more inspiring and encouraging people. You have to move away from the old influences, and it's a period before you then encounter new people and network with new people and make new friends. Is that something you experienced as well? Have you been through a lonely chapter?
Yeah, I would definitely like say so, because like the thing is like when you're younger, you're like you don't really recognize it, right? And I completely agree with you on like the social media thing. That's also a thing. Like if you're like looking at like people on social media, at like watching videos of people that like just make you feel better about themselves, like better about you, and like make you feel better because of how they feel about themselves,
Mm.
you can kind of feel like whatever this person has, like I want to be like that. Like, and they, like it's really a, like it kind of, you really feel that connection, right? So once you feel like okay, like once you grow that self-awareness, that recognition, like okay, like you know what, like maybe these people like aren't really the best for me. So like then you realize like in order for me to get better, I need to like really isolate myself, not only from like these people, but I also need to isolate myself from like videos, like content, whatever that like makes me feel bad about myself. Because I feel like, especially these days, that's like an important thing, to like distance you away from things that are designed to make you feel bad,
Mm.
just to get you to like maybe like give into that consumerism. Because a lot of that is like it's, do you feel bad about yourself? Buy this, it'll help you. Like that's the thing. But so there's the saying, right? Like growth is like lonely, and it's hard for you to grow if you have like too many inputs, and it's not the good kind, right? Too many chefs, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
When you read, like if you really want to get better, you have to like first be with yourself and like really like find within yourself, develop that self-awareness, is like what do I really want? And for that to happen, for like the growth to happen, you have to like sit by yourself, right? Like
Mm.
so I went through that like for like a maybe a year and a half, and then when I like came out of it, I was like, man, all this time I spent with like all these people, like it really did hold me back a lot more than I realized, because like maybe a lot of them had like much different priorities than what I wanted, and it kind of made me feel bad about having different priorities, right? So then when you come back out of it with that growth, now you know exactly the kind of people you want to be around. And it's like much easier to find these people because you immediately recognize them. Like you immediately recognize like the kind of people that you know are like you and that make you feel better about yourself. And like I think like coming out of that like COVID period, like after 2021, I like my entire circle just changed. I was just hanging out with different people, and like I felt completely different about myself as well because of that. right?
Hmm.
So that like that's when I kind of realized like, man, like the people around you like affect your entire like view of life. And so like, yes, you can choose your family, but like you can choose your friends, you can choose your partner. And really, if you go through that like growth phase at an early age, and like as early as possible, like you're gonna be in a much better spot to like pick better friends that are like gonna like last you a lifetime. You're gonna pick a better partner, because you're gonna know like what kind of person makes me feel good about myself. You'll know that like, okay, this is the kind of like exactly the kind of person that I need to be with, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I think when you do that and you spend time with people that believe in you, that believe in something within you that's better even than where you are, but still like you for who you are, not just like only like you because they see a potential in you, then you start to hold yourself to a higher standard anyway. And it's you touched on it a bit, um that idea that if people have high expectations of you, you're likely to perform better. So that's interesting how that ties into that idea where it's like, oh, if you become the five people you hang with most. And I think it goes both ways, right? It's not that you just imitate, because that's part of it. When you spend time with people, you imitate them naturally. I wrote part of this into my course, and I was just researching this and found out that only 7% of communication is verbal. I think like 20% is tonality. Another part of it is, and then a huge part of it is body language. So,
Yeah.
so it makes sense that we learn more through imitation, and that's how we learn when we're children as well and toddlers. Like people say that people don't do what you say; they do what you do. Like if you're a leader and you're just telling people what to do, but you're just lazy, you're not doing any of the work yourself. No, like everyone's just going to follow suit. But if you're someone who does everything a certain way, people are going to follow what you do. So that's how you learn through imitation, which is one side of that, becoming the five people you spend time with. But I think the other side of it then is that idea. What's that called? The effect where when people expect something of you, you do that thing.
The Pygmalion effect.
The Pygmalion effect. Okay, so that's so fascinating that if your friends have an expectation of you, that you're going to basically stay the same, or maybe you're even the guy that doesn't like, you're like kind of the low level guy in the group. You're not doing as well. You don't do as well financially. You don't get a very good job. You can't hold jobs down and things like that. And they're just expecting you to stay in that place. What does that do for you? And that's such an important part of having that positive support system in place where people actually believe in you, that you can do better, because your old friends probably aren't going to do that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like I actually experienced this like firsthand. So like um right after I graduated
Mm-hmm.
from university, I did like an internship, right? And before this, I don't think I'd ever experienced something like that. Like I just like approached the internship with like a lot of positive energy, like put a good foot forward. But like I had like 4 or 5 other people interns with me, and just like naturally they kind of like nominated me as like, okay, you're the guy. We expect that like you're gonna lead us, like help us do this and that. And like whenever like something was up, like they would turn to me and they would be like, okay, like you're our leader or something. And just like because they believed in me so much, I feel like my development was sped up so much more, because I'm like, oh my God, like, okay, like tell me what the problem is. And then whatever the thing was, whatever the challenge was, I never looked at it as like, oh my God, I can't do this. It was more like, okay, they're trusting me to do it. I know I can. And just the way that I approached things during that time was like, I'd never actually like experience that level of like confidence and like belief, because it was just like the result of everyone just like hyping me up or like supporting me and like believing in me. And I felt like, oh, like, just this rise in my confidence because of it. And I was like, yeah, this is like actually really a thing.
Sure, yeah, that's awesome. Yes, that's it's cool how it works like that. When people say this idea of you become the five people you spend time with the most, I just like no one ever really breaks down what the like how that happens. What's really going on there? Why do you become like those people more? And like I said, I think that imitation is one side of it. Like if you're spending time with people that are doing a certain thing, you're just going to naturally imitate what they're doing. You're going to become like them. But on the same side of it, if you're hanging out with people like, or if you're working with people like you were that believe in you, that expect greatness or good things from you, you're more likely to actually express that. That's so interesting. I had a study years ago about this, about how elementary school teachers, they were told in the study to just expect more or less from the kids. And it's a bit immoral, really, to say, like, I want you to expect less from these children, knowing what the effects might be. But the teachers that were told to expect more from those children, the grades went up. And the opposite
Yeah.
happened on the other side. So it's so interesting how that happened. And I wonder if that's kind of a bit of a psychic thing happening, like a like a spiritual thing, or it just comes through in their idiosyncrasies, like or how they're being with them, how they're talking with someone. Like how much of it is just cause and effect, and how much of it more is it more kind of metaphysical? It's so interesting to think about.
I'm just gonna turn a light on because it's gonna get dark.
Sure, yeah, no worries.
That a bit better. All right. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, we're good.
So, uh, that's actually really interesting. Like, because I feel like, just small details, like how much our brains notice like something is probably like so much more than what we actually register.
Mm,
Because like just like when you're told like, oh, I expect more like expect more from this person, when you
mhm.
feel a certain way about like somebody, I feel like your entire like behavior kind of changes. It's just like those little behaviors, like you'll probably give someone like a small thing to do, but like it kind of like like it's like establishes that like, oh, this person like trusts me, or this person believes in me. Like for example, like if you're like a new like a worker at the office or something, and your boss is like, oh, like I'm gonna head out early, here are the keys to the office, just like lock up before you leave and then give me the keys tomorrow. Like it's not a big action, but like immediately, even without thinking about it, you're like, they really trust me enough to like give me the keys and like give me this responsibility to like lock up and stuff. Like it's like those little things. I feel like our brains notice that so much, and we really like feel it. Like even in the like I said, communication is like mostly body language, right? I
Mhm.
feel like because of that, it completely like changes how you come across and how you like how someone perceives you, and that kind of affects how you think they perceive you, and that affects your confidence.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, there's so many little things that you can do to show someone that you believe in them, or that you expect more from them. Uh, I guess it kind of goes against the idea as well of uh, sometimes people will think about bad parents as being people who expect too much, say, of their children. So this is kind of like this other side of it, is where they expect so much. Like you can expect so much from someone that it puts pressure on them, and then they perform worse. I mean, I don't know any like studies on that, but I think there's definitely a balance there. And having
I've heard of one. I've heard of one. Like I don't know if it exactly applies, but I
Okay.
think they ran like a study on children that like loved painting. Okay,
Hmm.
so they brought in a bunch of children that like loved painting, and half of the children they gave them like once they finished their painting, they gave them a reward for like painting. So they gave them some money, and the other half they just let them paint. So after the experiment, it was determined that like when the half of the children that were like paid to like paint,
Mm.
they almost immediately from the next time onwards stopped enjoying painting because they were waiting to be paid. So their painting was like to get to that end outcome, and they stopped enjoying the process of painting something that they really loved
Oh,
doing. Like it
sure.
took away their joy of like doing the thing itself, and they were waiting to get the money. Like so it changed to
Mm.
that outcome, right?
Hmm.
So like when you really put pressure on someone to like finish something or get to an outcome, I feel like it makes the process like much harder to enjoy. So that's like a
Yeah.
real thing, you know?
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting how it's kind of if you can take something too far, like even this Pygmalion effect, like if you expect too much from someone, like more than they're comfortable with, maybe, then it puts overly pressure on them, and they get stressed, I guess, and then they might perform worse. I wonder if they would perform worse than they would in the first place anyway. I don't know how much of an interest like of decreasing in returns is there. Like how like once you put so much expectation on someone, the amount they improve slowly starts to drop off because you just it's too much pressure for them. Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think this is a good thing to talk about as well, I think, to before we finish, that the idea that too much of something is never a good thing. Like you need that balance in all aspects of life, and like kind of come up with this idea that anything in the extreme excess is negative. Even like the most positive thing that you could possibly think of, if you do it just to the absolute extreme, it becomes a negative thing.
Yeah. And I feel like that applies to like almost anything, right? Like they say like they tell everyone to drink water, but then you there is a like actually a limit to that even as well, right? There's like
Mm.
water poisoning, like so like with like any action, any like thing like you do, it's like there's always going to be like a limit of like a good thing because like there's like this famous saying, right? Like even too much of a good thing can become a bad thing.
Sure.
So you want to like kind of find like the balance, and like obviously balance is subjective, but I feel like through like experimentation and time for like each individual, you want to like find what is like the ideal like balance where like okay, like this feels just right. If I push it beyond that point, it's like not good for me anymore. And like just have that like again mindfulness, self-awareness to be like this is my cutoff point, and like once it's there, like I'll know to like back off a little bit, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely having that self awareness. I think there often has to be those periods of imbalance to balance things out because maybe at first you're you don't have very good self-esteem, you don't have a lot of confidence, and you need to push it past, like you're all the way over here and you need to push it all the way past, so when you come back to normal you're like then you can balance and then you'll kind of shift side to side a little bit. But if you kind of just go from here up to there, then you're likely to kind of just come back down and then you're going to end up around here somewhere. So you have to go like all the way past to come back and find your equal again. And it's so interesting. Anna Lemke, she was on the Human Lab podcast. So she's a addiction specialist. She wrote the book Dopamine Nation, and she talked about that with dopamine levels. So if you have a huge spike in dopamine, they won't just go down to normal level. They'll drop way below baseline because you have to maintain homeostasis. And it's the same the other way around. And then when if they drop down, then they have to go back up. So doing anything in the extreme in that way leads to the extreme on the other side. I guess So you could get stuck in a cycle of like the extremities. Like, oh, I'm on this side, then on this side. So you have to kind of find that middle ground. But I think in the beginning, you have to sometimes push things to your limit to know where your limit is. And then you can back off and then you can work around that area. Mm.
Yeah, exactly. Because like I feel like if you never really try to push to your limit and you just always stay in your like comfort zone, your limit might actually be a lot higher than you think it is. So you don't really want to like initially you don't really want to like hold yourself back. You want to actually like go and see where your limit is, and then you can like with time find your like ideal sweet spot.
Definitely, yeah. I think we're a lot stronger than we believe we are as well. We're a lot more resilient than we think we're capable of being. And when we push ourselves to the limit and we take responsibility and we do things that give us meaning, but that are very difficult, we find that we're really capable of staying committed, even through hard times, like more than we thought we would be.
Yeah, exactly. So like that's like a real thing, right? Like you never actually know what you're capable of until like you like achieve something you never could have imagined. So like really to like hit your limit until you hit your limit, you might be going for like a really long time. And then like, so you don't really want to sell yourself short from the very beginning. Again, that's like a long process of just going along and like finding like what's your sweet spot, where you want to be, what you want, and then like just going along with it until like you're comfortable.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Well, I think we're out of time, but Mayaaz, really good to talk to you, man. Thank you for coming on the show. And where can people connect with you? Where are you? Have you got a website, or are you what social medias are you on?
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was like a lot of fun. I don't usually get to do this, like just sit and talk about like my interests for like, an hour and a half, but like this has been like a lot of fun. People can just find me on LinkedIn. It's like Mayaaz Reza, pretty simple, like, and my newsletter and everything is on my LinkedIn, so you can like find me from there.
Awesome. Great. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on. I've really enjoyed our conversation too. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks, man. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. You too.